Alright, welcome everybody to what is normally a podcast, but this time is actually sort of a video. As in crude Excel spreadsheets like this, I'm going to be showing and demonstrating the math of how the energy and infrastructure portion of the whole Green New Deal idea is not going to work. I'm going to show the math behind that. Granted, under some altered circumstances where society is completely twisted and oppressed out of specific freedoms and choices by dictatorial powers. If that is the route that anyone who supports the Green New Deal wanted to go down, then yes, some of it might become feasible, but then you'd be getting into the philosophical area of whether oppressing people for their own good is for their own good. It isn't, but that's as far as I'll say about that because I don't actually do politics. I do energy and resources on this channel. Oil and gas, electricity, renewables, minerals, mining, everything. This is one of those times where politics is deep reaching into energy and pretending that it knows what it's doing. Now, going through the math, we're going to start with the whole solar panel craze. So converting over the world's entire electrical generation capacity to renewable energy only, we have to start with the world's current capacity, which is around 6.5 terawatts of electricity generation. And that number is not going to stay there. That's only going to be increasing because, for one, remember, there are still about 900 million people, between 900 million and 1 billion, who don't even have electricity. And there are a billion or two people around the world who have electricity, in quotation marks, but they have fourth world or third world electricity, meaning they don't have modern first world living comforts. Their version of electricity access basically just consists of a wire running into the house to power a single hanging incandescent light bulb from the ceiling. Plus also, population is currently at about 7.8 billion and growing, and is likely going to be peaking up around 10 billion. So the only way that this number would be staying completely the same is if you forcibly kept those additional 2 billion people from coming into the world, and also forcibly denied those 3 billion or so people who have either no electricity access. You'd have to force them to stay in that position for the rest of their lives. So you would have to do those handful of things, which would be sociopathic, to say the least. But for argument's sake, just for doing the math, we even round this down to just 6 terawatts of generating capacity, just to show that it won't even work, even if you did keep it at that number. So for solar panels, the primary issue, no matter what type you're using, whether you're using crude, regular, generic, low efficiency, and by silicon I mean not containing any of the other layer types, just silicon and phosphorus, because all the types contain silicon. It's just that the higher efficiency solar panels, the ones that we want to use now and are building these large generating facilities with, have other layers of things that require much rarer materials like tellurium and germanium. But just to start off with the silver issue, so 1 square meter of solar panel has about 1/3 of an ounce of silver, and currently solar panels generate between 150 to 200 watts per square meter if they are in good direct sunlight. So the middle range obviously being about 170 watts, even though that's only, again, for good direct sunlight. So to run up the silver consumption math, divide 1 terawatt of generating capacity by 170, which again is the number for a single square meter of solar panel. That gets you about 5.8 billion solar panels for a terawatt of generating capacity, or 5.8 billion square meters that is, and 1/3 of an ounce of silver for every square meter. So 5.8 billion square meters times 1/3 gives you 1.93 billion ounces of silver for every terawatt of solar generating capacity. So 1 terawatt requires 1.93 billion ounces of silver, and then you just start adding up. 2 terawatts, 3.86 billion ounces, 3 terawatts, 5.8 billion ounces, and then going up and up and up, and once you get to 6 terawatts, you're at a required amount of silver of 11.5 billion ounces. And in terms of the availability of silver, you not only have to deal with the remaining amount of silver in the ground that we can extract and use, because don't forget, although recycling is a thing, recycling metals comes from the end life of a product, so effectively the recycling of that metal from that product just goes back into making the new replacement of that product. So you can't siphon recycled resource away from that to make something else, like silver from recycled electronics to make solar panels, without still needing more additional new silver to make the replacement of that thing that you stole the recycled silver from. And we won't deal with the mining extraction rates, but silver production from silver mines worldwide has already peaked at just under 900 million ounces mined per year back in 2015. So the consistent availability of new silver is already going to be constrained, let alone having to deal with just the pure numbers of how much silver is left in the ground to be mined to begin with, which we will now deal with. That amount being estimated at 560,000 tons, and having to convert that to ounces times 2,200 pounds per ton. That gives you 1.232 billion pounds times 16 ounces. Gives you, rounded up for benefit of the doubt, assuming 20 billion available ounces left to be mined. So these numbers here would be all green, because even 11.5 billion ounces is still, only about half of 20. However, you have to account for something. Here's where we go into the part where only dictatorial forcing would actually make that a reality, because you cannot use all of that silver just for your solar panels. Silver is used for many other things as well. For how much silver each year is able to be consumed to make solar panels is about 15% of the supply. And that gap was only opened up for silver for solar panels because of the death of traditional photography, because most of that used to be consumed by traditional photography, because that uses silver iodide and silver compounds to develop the old original film. However, solar demand is continuing to grow and is beginning to push outside of that window and compete with the other items. So if you assume 15% available, that leaves you with only 3 billion ounces, which would allow us to construct a bit more than a whole new terawatt of solar power generating capacity. However, then once you get to 2 terawatts, you're already up and over, but maybe there'd be some wiggle room, so I left it blue. Now, unlike gold, not a lot of silver, comparatively at least, is consumed in jewelry, only about another 15%. So if you use your dictatorial powers and ban jewelry, then you could have up to 30% available, and that would mean 6 billion remaining new ounces of silver, which would let you freely get up to about 3 terawatts of solar power capacity. And I don't know, maybe you'd still have some wiggle room going up to 4, even though that's getting close to 8. But after that, everything goes red. And basically the same story over here when you have 9 billion ounces available. And that would be if you banned the holding of silver as an investment item and holding of silver by banks. So I put up the 2 options that, you could potentially do with, super global dictatorial power, while still leaving the silver consumption available for all the industrial necessities and chemical catalysts. So that would leave you with 9 billion ounces available, which would basically let you get up to 4, maybe you could push 5 terawatts, and then after that you'd be done. And I know someone will think you could alternate some wind power in there. However, wind power already has its own constraints that we'll be dealing with a little bit later. So I started with those normal solar panels that only require silver as their rare or semi-rare metal requirement, because I knew if I started off with the tellurium problem, someone would say we could just use the pure silicon ones. However, the pure silicon ones, again, are about 170 watts per square meter. The more efficient cadmium tellurium ones, or the stacked layer germanium ones, but germanium's an even bigger problem, so we'll stick with tellurium. But the more efficient ones, the tellurium ones, can get over 200 watts per square meter, up to about 210. So we divide a terawatt by 210 instead, and we get 4.7 billion square meters times 1/3 equals a lesser amount of about 1.56 billion ounces of silver required per terawatt of solar power generating capacity. And then from there on, you know the availability numbers. So the graph is a little bit altered. I didn't do the wiggle room blue this time because I didn't feel like it, because you're not actually going to have it. So in the end, it honestly comes out about the same, except on the last column, you have a bit more leeway up to 4 terawatts, and maybe some wiggle room on the 5 terawatts. Okay, now dealing with the issue of the more efficient solar panels, again, assuming we use the tellurium ones, and just let me zoom in on this again for you. But again, because germanium is much more rare than even tellurium, which is already pretty rare, we'll assume we're using tellurium instead of germanium for the more efficient solar panels. So tellurium in the cadmium telluride solar panels is about 1 gram per square foot, and there are 10.7 square feet per meter, rounding down. It was like 10.74 or 5 or something. So obviously that works out to 10.7 grams per square meter. And at their more efficient number of 210 watts per square meter, divide 1 kilowatts by 210 watts, and that gets you 4.7. So 4.7 rounded down for benefit of the doubt. 4.7 grams per kilowatt, 4.7 kilograms per megawatt, 4.7 tons per gigawatt, and 4.7 kilotons per terawatt. So those numbers work out to 1 terawatt, obviously 4.7 kilotons, 2 terawatts, 9.4, 3 terawatts, 14.1, 4 terawatts, 18.8, 5 terawatts, 23.5, 6 terawatts, 28.2, and we stopped at 6 below the current global amount. Below the current global amount with silver, because you couldn't even get that high just factoring in the silver. Now with tellurium, you could get that high. However, that would require discounting the existence of the silver, which you can't do because you need the silver. But even just hypothetically, since we're going to need more than just 6 terawatts of electricity capacity, we already use more than that anyways globally, but we're going to need more than just the current amount. But if you went up to 7 terawatts, that would require just under 33,000 tons of tellurium, 8 terawatts, 37.6, and 9 terawatts, 42.3. And the remaining amount of extractable tellurium coming in at 38,000 tons. So this column, I forgot to label it, but that would be assuming the full amount is available. In reality, however, only about 40% of mining output each year is available to solar panel production. So rounding up for solar power's benefit, that would give you 16,000 available tons, which would only allow you to get between 3 and 4 terawatts of solar power capacity. Now, if you banned some of what you might consider tellurium's non-essential uses, like its chemical uses in the production of certain types of rubber, as well as everything that falls unspecified under its other uses category, then you could push availability up to 55%, 21,000 tons, rounded up, and that would let you get safely up to 4 terawatts, maybe up to like 4.5, so between 4 and 5, but then you'd be stopped dead in your tracks. Okay, so then, moving on from that, you would have to deal with another problem, which is the energy storage problem. Because, the sun only shines 12 hours of the day, usually on average, less in the winter, and at a lesser angle in the winter. And also the wind doesn't blow all the time, and also you constantly have to replace panels and do maintenance on turbines and stuff. So you need storage, energy storage capacity, And also, electricity demand fluctuates. It's not some perfectly stable amount that, allows for a fantasy land. It fluctuates throughout the day. It follows a general trend in most places, but it fluctuates, which is where the supremacy of fossil fuels actually shows up, because the amount of power you're generating from them is dependent on the amount of fuel you're burning, whichever type you're using. So they're essentially the same as a gas pedal in a car or a dial on a stove. If you need more power, you can crank it up. If you need to reduce power, you can dial it back down. With wind and solar, you can't do that. You are restricted to whatever the sun and the wind are giving you at that particular moment of that particular day. It is not inside your control, because it is not stored energy that you are discharging at will. It is current energy that you are directly utilizing as it's being passed over you. Fossil fuels are energy storage. They are stored energy that you can discharge by burning them, and then, that passes to the steam goes to the generator, blah, blah, blah. But you can discharge that energy at will. And nuclear and hydropower are actually pretty close to that same category, because the weather and the climate cycle has already deposited all that water. It has already carried it up to a higher elevation than where it's flowing to. That's stored energy. And so you can increase or decrease the outputs of a hydro dam by increasing or decreasing the amount of water flowing through it. And in terms of nuclear, you can up and down dial it. Granted, it has a bit of a delay, but similar to how a coal plant up and down dials for more short-term fluctuations, in reality, not all of the steam being generated is usually going through the generator. Usually, especially with nuclear, it's generating more power than would be getting consumed by the surrounding area. So you can widen some valve openings on the controls and let more steam pass through and increase the actual amount of power generation. Or in the opposite direction, shut the valves a little bit more, restrict the amount of steam that's actually going through the generator. And for the more longer-term daily patterns, obviously they adjust the depth of the control rods in and out of the reactor to actually raise or lower the rate of reaction. But either way, hydro and nuclear are still some of the same. They are stored energy that you can discharge at will and alter the discharging of at will. The renewables don't have that. Well, geothermal does, but no one's actually interested in geothermal. Everyone just wants solar and wind. Geothermal is superior, and I will stand by that. But everyone just wants solar and wind. And solar and wind are not stored. They are not dischargeable at will. They are current present energy. We talked about this problem in a different video. Please watch that video. It will explain, or listen to it rather. It will explain a lot of things. It's called The World You Know Is Ending. There'll be a link to it in the comments and other stuff, blah, blah, blah. But back to the concept at hand here. So to turn renewable energy into dischargeable energy, you need to store it. For that, you need batteries. A lot of batteries, a lot of wasted metal. And so we're going to do the math for our vanadium redox batteries, which are the ones that are starting to be pushed now, because there's already going to be some nickel and lithium supply issues with the EV batteries for electric vehicles, not even accounting for potentially using them for grid storage. So we're just going to do the vanadium redox math. So vanadium redox batteries have a storage capacity presently of about 25 watts per liter at a 1.6 m concentration, and vanadium's weight, rounded down, is about 50 grams per mole. I know I'm using the wrong symbols, but whatever, I don't care. So about 1.6 moles per liter, and that is obviously 1.6 times 50. That gives you 80 grams of vanadium required per 25 watts of storage capacity. So 1 kilowatt, obviously, 1,000 divided by 25 is 40. 40 times 80 is 3,200, or 3.2 kilograms for 1 kilowatt of storage capacity. So going up the powers, 1 megawatt of storage capacity would require 3.2 tons of vanadium. 1 gigawatt, 3,200 tons. and 1 terawatt of storage capacity, 3.2 million tons. And the current global electrical capacity converted into vanadium redox batteries storage would require 20.7 million tons. Now, the other problem you have to deal with is that's not enough, because that's hours, kilowatt hours, megawatt hours, terawatt hours. Electricity consumption is typically measured as X per hour. So in the absence of wind or sun, especially in the absence of the sun, you actually need many hours of power provision stored up. And also, because things are going to break down constantly everywhere, and they have to be fixed and brought back and whatnot, and just for power fluctuations themselves in general. So that would be the equivalent of 1 hour of total global electrical generating capacity in the form of storage. So a total of 1 hour of global electricity demand stored would require 20.7 million tons of vanadium. 2 hours, 41.4 million tons. 3 hours, 62.1. And half the time of a night, 6 hours, would require 124.2 million tons. Going beyond that, 7 hours gets up to almost 150 million tons. 10 hours of storage, not even completely through the night, gets you up to 207 million tons of vanadium. And you couldn't even build beyond these amounts anyways. And also, again, remember, this is only being measured at the world's current electricity usage numbers, not accounting for the higher future numbers. So you wouldn't have enough. You wouldn't be able to go into any reasonable, absence of source provision here. Whereas with power plants, for coal plants in particular, if there's some kind of supply disruption, there's some kind of accident that's like blocking railways somewhere or whatever, and they're not going to be able to get a new shipment of coal for a few days or a few weeks. A huge number of coal-fired power plants actually have mounds of coal outside as a reserve supply. Typically, many of them have up to 6 months of spare coal on them, enough to run and keep providing power for 6 months without new supply shipments. And nuclear power plants, nuclear reactors, the way a nuclear reactor goes, you initiate the reaction, those fuel rods will fizz for 2 or 2.5 years before you even need to replace them. And for some of the newer intended 4th generation nuclear designs, the new fuel design would actually allow for a fuel lifetime fission operation of 3 to 6 years. Natural gas-fired power plants, the ones we're switching to the most, ironically, they're the one type that would actually have problems because they kind of rely on a constant stream of gas coming down the pipeline. But even some of them have storage tanks, LNG storage tanks, or just small underground storage capacity sites on them that wouldn't let them operate on the scale of coal in a supply cutoff, but enough to operate for like a few days or a week or two. And even hydropower from dams, in many cases it's not just a complete free-flowing river. In many dam cases, they've dammed up, they blocked the river for a huge amount of time and have, a whole enormous lake reservoir dammed up behind the dam. So, if there's low rainfall for a while and the river flow isn't quite that great, they can just release extra water from the built-up reservoir. And depending on the size of the dam and reservoir, that all that pent-up water is, enough to go for a while. And don't go assuming that the Green New Deal in the long term would allow for even things like hydro dams to remain, because that's environmentally unfriendly and it's blocking the river and stuff. So in a renewable only situation, all you have is several hours of battery capacity. That's it. And in terms of total vanadium availability, there's likely about 85 million tons remaining left to be mined, and a decent amount is in the ground in either troubled places or soon to be very troubled places, like South Africa. We actually have a special video about that too. You should go watch that one. South Africa is inevitably going to be a problem. But there's many places that are also becoming problems, like California. So you have the color gradient, for whether it still fits in with the 85 million tons. You get blue once you go over 80, and then you're all red. And I didn't even do the percentage breakdowns because these numbers are already so bad anyways. You can just imagine how that would go. So again, this is assuming you get to use all 85 million tons of that vanadium just for these grid storage batteries. You get to use it all, even though almost all of it is in actuality consumed each year for metals, steels, alloys, catalysts, other products. None of it's really used for removable, useless things, quote unquote, like jewelry or something. So you don't even have a silver situation here. Vanadium is used in necessary things. So you can't just shove your way in on percentages there. So I didn't even do those because even if you could use it all, these numbers are already really bad. You'll only be able to get like 4 hours of energy storage of the world's capacity, assuming again that it stayed at 6.48 terawatts, which it won't, unless you stop 2 billion people from being born and or force 3 billion people to remain at third world living standards or below. And now going over here to deal with the maximum efficiency for vanadium redox batteries. They currently, if you remember, are about 25 watts per liter, and it is theorized if you could get, like ultimate maximum efficiency, you might be able to get as high as 47 watts stored per each liter with 1.6 M concentration. So that would be 80 grams per 47 watts. 1 kilowatt divided by 47 times 80, and that gets you 1,702 grams, round it down. Therefore, 1 kilowatt of storage requiring only 1.7 kilograms of vanadium this time, and 1 megawatt requiring 1.7 tons. 1 gigawatt requiring 1,700 tons, 6.48 terawatts, the world's total electrical capacity currently. In storage form would require about 11 million tons of vanadium. So with that, you could do much better. You could get up to 6 reasonable hours, and even get up to 7. Actually, you'd start to be getting into the blue range there. 8 hours, you couldn't pull it off anymore. And again, this is assuming that all the vanadium is available for nothing but these redox batteries. No metal usage, no steel usage, nothing else whatsoever, which is not how the world works, and it's not going to happen. So now we'll go over to nickel, which you might have been thinking, wait, what about lithium ion batteries for storage? Well, no, those are all going to the EVs, and that's going to be a problem all of its own, I assure you. So grid storage is going to end up having to be vanadium redox. EVs are where all the nickel's going to go, and it's going to be gone. So currently, the current lithium ion batteries that they're using require primarily of nickel, manganese, and cobalt. Why? Because it's the best. There are others. One of them's lithium manganese oxide. One of them that a lot of the cheap Chinese EVs are using is like iron and phosphate. But the thing is, those other chemistries, they're trash. They don't work. Well, they work, but they don't work as well as using nickel, manganese, and cobalt. Now at present, there's an issue because cobalt is not in abundant supply. And also a lot of it tends to be mined with child slave labor in the Congo. So everyone's been trying to, back away from it, understandably, and rightly so. And they have been able to adjust things to maintain the same efficiency and storage capacity and stuff in the absence of the cobalt by increasing the factor of nickel in the battery. They're basically just replacing the cobalt with the nickel, but regardless, up until present, now that we've started switching everything over to the newer kinds, excluding the cobalt out of them, the batteries previously had about 30 kilograms of nickel per 50 kilowatts at about 50% of whichever one is, the cathode or the anode, being nickel. the new chemistry that the future batteries from this point forward are going to be is about 80% nickel. So 80% is 160% of 50%. So that extra 60% of 30 is 18. So you just add that and you get 48 kilograms of nickel for the 50 kilowatt battery. And that's kind of like, you know, the standard one. And they usually have ranges in the 200s, lower mid 200s, which is enough for most people. However, some people want more ranges. They want, you know, over 300. Or, you know, they just want fancy Teslas that have like 75 kilowatt batteries, and that would obviously then have 72 kilograms of nickel. So we did the numbers for both at 48 kilograms per EV, since we're getting rid of cobalt and sticking with nickel. So each 1,000 new EVs will require 48 tons. Each 1 million new EVs will require 48,000 tons. And for 1 billion electric vehicles, that will require 48 million tons of nickel. Assuming that everyone gets, say, you know, a mild range, you know, 200-something miles range, regular EV, as opposed to a longer range EV. A longer range EV, obviously, you can work those numbers out. So 1 billion requires 48 million tons. Currently, there's a bit over 1.2 billion personal automobiles in the world. So if you were to EV all of those, that would require 57.6 million tons of nickel. And by 2040, there's going to be, most likely at current trends, about 2 billion personal automobiles in the world. And that will require, if they were all EVs, 96 million tons of nickel. And require these higher numbers if people were to get, you know, the longer range ones. Now, also dealing with the other types of vehicles, like, you know, freight trucks or electric freight trucks. They're going to have a lot more powerful battery packs because they're going to have several factors of range more than regular people's car EVs. And also, they're a lot heavier and going to be pulling a lot heavier things than just, you know, your personal EV pulling you around. So their batteries using the Tesla Semi, for example, are a bit under a megawatt at about 947 kilowatts. So you divide that by 50, multiply the result by 48, and you get 909 kilograms. Round that down to 900 for benefit of the doubt. And there are tens of millions of freight trucks operating in the world. And if we brought the future 10 billion population up to first world living standards, at the average of first world nation numbers of about 3 million trucks per 300 million people, obviously factoring out, you know, 1 million per 100 million people, 10 billion people at first world living standards would end up with about 100 million freight trucks. So with 900 kilograms of nickel per freight truck, every 1,000 will require 900 tons of nickel. Every 1 million will require 900,000 tons of nickel. 10 million of them will require 9 million tons, and the full 100 potential million of them will require 90 million tons of nickel. And then also we have to deal with all the heavy equipment and construction vehicles, and they operate on a wide range from much smaller ones that people can rent themselves to dig up their yards, to snow clearing bobcat type stuff, to full-blown construction vehicles, to mining vehicles and mega excavators and haul trucks. But I went with just, you know, sort of like the medium-ish area, and figured the two ends will kind of balance each other out. Now, a lot of different heavy equipment vehicles have different fuel tank sizes and fuel burn rates, and it also kind of depends on how much work they're doing. But I figured making an electric version, you'd want to, similar to how much fuel they can hold, you'd want to make the battery pack equivalent for being able to supply a full workday or work shift of power at them potentially working at maximum overhaul. So with a kind of sort of medium output range of about 200 kilowatts per hour, and assuming a 6 to 8 hour work shift, benefit of the doubt using the lower number, 6, obviously that would give you 1.2 megawatts required. and 50 goes into that, obviously 24 times, so multiply that by 48, gives you 1152. We'll round all the way down for green benefit of the doubt to 1.1 tons of nickel. So 1,000 electric heavy equipment vehicles would require 1,100 tons of nickel. 1 million of them would require 1.1 million tons. 20 million of them would require 22 million tons. 40 million of them, which is around, I forgot the exact number, but around where I remember reading the estimated number of current heavy equipment or construction vehicles in the world currently is. So the entire existing fleet of them in the world now converted over to electric would require 44 million tons of nickel. And if we account for the still rising 2 to 3 billion people in the world, plus the 2 billion people yet to be born in the world, we could go as high as 78. Or if you want to stick to just adding a third, maybe, we could go as high as 60 million, which would require 66 million tons of nickel, or up to 85.8 million tons of nickel. And also the actual total number of quote-unquote lighter vehicles on the road, or light vehicles, presently is actually about 1.4 billion. 1.2 billion of those are people's cars, and about 200 million of those are work vehicles, or heavier, lighter vehicles. Everything, ranging from mail trucks and Amazon or UPS trucks to business vehicles, work vans, lawn care trucks, exterminator trucks, plumber's trucks, everything. And not using the bigger delivery truck examples, just using the smaller generic truck examples, like electric pickup trucks. They're having about 100 kilowatt batteries, it looks like. So obviously that's 250s times 48, 96 kilograms of nickel would be required for each one. So for every 1,000, we'll call them job vehicles. Most of them are light trucks of the sort. For every 1,000 job vehicles, you'll need 96 tons of nickel. For every million, 96,000 tons. Every 10 million, 960,000 tons. And to get up to the current low-end estimate of 200 million, all replaced with electric versions, you will need 19.2 million tons of nickel. And again, just using the lighter generic throw a third on estimate for bringing up the remaining rising third and fourth world population, plus the 2 billion people yet to come onto this planet, go up to 300 million, and that gets you 28.8 million tons. And for totaling it all together, just replacing the currently existing vehicles, you would need 273.2 million tons of nickel. And for the rising third world plus extra people, you would need 304.8 million tons of nickel, which you don't have. The first issue being that the amount remaining is more than 200 million tons. It's decent, but with some estimated more, if you were willing to basically just dredge the entire ocean seafloor to try to get some nickel out of it, which people who are advocates of EVs and the Green New Deal, I highly doubt they are the type of people that would be for that. As Green Revolution advocacy, people tend to already be against mining itself to begin with, even though a lot more mining needs to be done to get a lot of the necessary metals for the things they want to do. But you have about 219 million tons left to be had. However, you also have to account for the fact that nickel is used for many other things, many necessary other things. In reality, at present, only about 5% gets to be consumed each year from global outputs to make EV batteries. So that would leave you with only 12 million available tons. I did a much darker red because that ain't going to work out. Now I gave some upward adjustments. Assume you ban all nickel plating. A lot of it is decorative anyways. Some of it is necessary, but you could theoretically replace it with chromium. It wouldn't work as well, but it would be okay. That would bring you up to 12% availability, which would mean you would have 26.4 million tons. It still ain't going to work. it already wasn't going to work even if you had all 219 anyways, but also assume you ban all of the unspecified uses that just fall into the quotation marked other uses category. That would bring you up to 16% total available, 35.2 million tons. It ain't gonna work. And presently about 2/3 of nickel gets recycled at the end of its product life, most of that being steel and metal alloys being remelted and separated to their separate components to make new steel and metal alloys. But since recycling picked up for metals industrially at the start, I believe it was the 60s or 70s, they were starting from, it was like 78% of the fresh nickel demand was for steels and alloys, and having a 2/3 recycling rate brought that down to about 65%. So, 2 goes into 13 about 6 times, rounded down. So if you assume you can magically recycle absolutely all of it, that one more third would drop that demand down to 59%, give you a free 6%, allow you to get up to 22% fully available for your batteries. And that would be 48.4 million tons. It won't work. It already wasn't going to work. But really, guys, it's not going to work. You have to eventually accept this reality. The lithium isn't as bad. So the lithium is not needed in as big of a quantity. It's for each 50 kilowatt battery pack, it's only about 10 kilograms. So for every 1,000 EVs, that's about 10 tons of lithium. For every million, that's about 10,000 tons. And for every billion, that's obviously about 10 million tons. For the current 1.2 billion personal automobiles, that's about 12 million tons. And for the expected 2 billion by 2040, that's 20 million tons. All of which are okay, they're in the green compared to total resource availability. Now for work vehicles, 100 kilowatt battery, obviously that's just times 2, so 20 kilograms, a million of those, 20 kilotons, 100 million, 2 megatons, 200 million, the present number would obviously be 4, and the lessened but expected possible total of just throwing an extra third on of 300 million would be 6 million required tons. The larger vehicles, freight trucks, benefit of the doubt, rounding down from the beginning, from 947 down to 900, divide by 50, 18 times 10, gets you needing about 180 kilograms per electric freight truck, 180 tons per 1,000, 180,000 tons per 1 million, for 10 million, 1.8 million tons, and the total potential 10 billion population likely 100 million, 18 million tons. And going down to heavy equipment vehicles, construction vehicles, average 1.1 megawatts, rounded down from about 1.15, divide by 50, 22 times 10 kilograms, 220 kilograms per heavy equipment vehicle, averaged out. 1,000 of them, 220 tons, a million of them, 220,000 tons, 10 million of them, 2.2, 20, 4.4. The rough area of currently estimated total in operation, 40 million, would require 8.8 million tons of lithium. Just throwing another third on, instead of the potentially likely 78, 13.2, and the full potential 78 million, 17.1 million tons of lithium. And those total numbers combined too, at the current vehicle amounts, about 42.8 million tons of lithium if you were to replace all of them. And the real future likely total amounts will end up requiring 61.1 million tons of lithium. Now for the actuality, we have a remaining total of over 100 million tons of lithium, pretty decent. And these numbers would actually work out if you had complete availability, but however you don't. About 65% of lithium currently is available to be consumed to make batteries each year, and that works out to about 68 million tons. So you would be green for the current numbers. For the total future vehicle amounts, you'd be getting a little bit blue area. However, when you account for the fact that not all of those batteries being made are EV batteries. It ends up dropping down to about 42% being available for EV batteries, which was probably actually 43 million tons, forgive me for that, but it wouldn't matter because it still wouldn't work. So this would actually be blue, because that would be really pushing the threshold, and this would still be red though, so it won't work. And then we come to the rare earth metals. So starting down with wind, because the wind turbines don't look too bad until you add in the electric vehicles, and the fact that neodymium and dysprosium and praseodymium are needed in other uses. But for wind power, the requirement inside is about 200 kilograms of neodymium for each megawatt of generating capacity, which obviously works up to 200 tons per gigawatt and 200,000 tons per terawatt, which compared to the numbers, again, if you had literally all of the resource available to you, wouldn't even be that bad. 1 terawatt, 200, you could even go all the way up to just below the current 6 terawatts and only need 1.2 million tons of neodymium. And you could go higher than that into future numbers and still need less than 2. And assuming none being used for EVs, all the other numbers, when you factor in the different things, the other uses and stuff, and the different percentages are still almost all green. However, in this green future, EVs exist. So for an EV, a standard-sized EV, I did not even include or do the math for the additional stuff, like, the heavier vehicles and everything, just the cars. So for a regular EV, not a big truck, not a huge freight truck or not a construction vehicle, but for a regular EV, it's about 4 kilograms of neodymium in the motor magnets. And obviously for 1,000 EVs, that's 4 tons of neodymium used for every 1,000. And for every million EVs, that's 4,000 tons of neodymium. For a billion EVs, going up to that number, will consume 4 million tons of neodymium. So working out 1.2 billion, the current number of personal cars, 4.8 million tons. And the current 1.4 billion total light vehicles, if you're just assuming all the electric, trucks and delivery vans and stuff would use the exact same size motor, that would, be 5.6 million tons. They'll likely use bigger ones, but again, not factoring that in. And throwing them out and then just accounting for the 2 billion total cars of the 2040 future, of the future projection, would require all 8 million tons of extractable neodymium. Then if we add on all the trucks and vans and everything for work vehicles, that jumps up to 9.2. And if we throw on the 100 million freight trucks and just assume that they're still all using one of those, same little tiny motors, that would go up to 9.6. Granted, actually much higher because they're using bigger motors and using multiple motors actually. So the wind doesn't end up looking too good when you account for the fact that EVs also are going to exist. And if you weren't doing any wind power or anything else, and all of the rare earth stuff, particularly in this case the neodymium, was available just for EVs, you could get up to just about 2 billion cars and not have any room for the other vehicles. However, in reality, only about 25% of neodymium each year is available to be used to make motor-type magnets. Magnets that end up getting used in motors and also in wind turbines. They're classified in the same thing. A lot of additional neodymium is used to make more magnets, but magnets for other things like electronics and other stuff. So that's only 2 million tons actually available, which doesn't work. It would work if you weren't doing EVs and you were only doing wind, and then a wide variety of uses categorized under other uses. If you just assumed that those are useless and banned all other uses, then you could have up to 4 million tons available. And that would get you one blue block here. And then it wouldn't work after that. It would still work for the wind turbines, like I said, if EVs didn't exist. However, they exist. So that's the end of the math session that I had set up for this, of how the whole Green New Deal, all clean, renewable fantasy future isn't going to work, because it's not. Now, I've been recording for a significantly longer amount of time than this video is actually going to last for, so my voice is getting pretty worn. So that's the end of this. Thank you everybody for watching. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't already, check out some of the other stuff I've done. If you want to support me, and only if you can, actually, mind you, PayPal and Patreon links are both down in the description below and in the top pinned comment as well. Thank you, everybody. May God bless and protect all of you, and may all across this world come to faith and redemption in the name of Christ Jesus our Lord. Amen.